Greetings, this is the Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer Program. The acronym for the program is Cree, C-R-E-E, and that is my handle. The date is August 19th, 2012. Okay, this is a conversation with my husband, who we've been calling Sonny, and you haven't heard from for a while. And I'm hearing an echoing, which I didn't hear before we went on the air. So let me see. Much better. I don't know. Okay. So it's been about a little over 5 weeks since I've been on the air, and a few words about that. A few words about what I learned while I've been off the air, looking at the stats and some things that motivated me to do this program tonight, actually motivated us. And the interesting thing is that the stats were, at the very least every day, as good as they had been while I was broadcasting consistently every week, sometimes with guests, sometimes without. And most of the time during this 5-week hiatus, it has been the stats, the listenership to the podcast every week have been significantly greater. I'm not going to give the exact numbers, but I am going to say that for most of the time, the listenership has doubled since I've been off the air, which is curious. I don't think that it has so much to do with me being off the air as much as it is the subject matter that has been covered for the last 3 programs before I stopped broadcasting. And the subject matter, I guess that's the thing that people are struggling with the most or most interested in. That should not be surprising, having to do with this relationship, this thing that we do, that we have to do, that we have to get right, between black male and black female. And so I don't know if it's new people listening each week, I don't know, or people who are interested enough in the subject matter to where then they became interested in what else was in the archives. I'm not sure. But that's incredibly significant to be off the air for 5 weeks and have the listenership double. So yeah, I came to the conclusion that it is something that needs to be discussed, but I'm not made in a way that I am good at repetition. I'm not, that's just not how I'm made. Like I said, there's a value to repetition, and I'm not saying that there's anything elite or wonderful about it. It's just not the way that I am. I feel like if I can't bring something new, if there's no value-added content, if I can't say something different, add a different kind of perspective, a different kind of insight than I've said before, I'm at a loss for words. And I really feel like I'm wasting people's time. And so, for that reason, as well as just a whole series of things that have just been piling up, that tend to pile up as a person, but particularly a black person, I just haven't been back. But what has happened in the last month, and has just come to a crescendo in the last few days, I guess, but it's been building for about the last month, is just this a kind of a wisdom that, for me, I hadn't had before. I can hear you breathing, Sonny. And I think Sonny would say the same thing. It's just learning when to cut losses and understanding how damaging, the full scope of how damaging it is to marry, to have people in your quote-unquote family marry white folks. Or if you've done it yourself. And as I said in the description, this is not some sort of explanation or some sort of great confessional about how irreparable it is, meaning some sort of statement that it's irreparable, and I'm not putting on sackcloth, and neither is Sonny, begging for inclusion in the group of people who are seriously trying to solve this problem, stating our irreparable harm and how we'll never be the same. I don't believe that to be the case at all. I think that it's pretty damaging, and I think for a lot of people, if not even most folks who are in that situation, it can happen like that. And so this is a discussion about the lingering effects and what, if anything can be done about it, and when to cut your losses. So I use the metaphor of the hard drive. So when those kind of intimate, if intimate is the right word, when they get when the opponent gets that close to you, it's a virus. It becomes like a Trojan sort of virus on your hard drive. And I recently had to try to remove a piece of software from my computer, and I was still unable to it was still showing up on my hard drive. I couldn't get rid of it, and I couldn't operate certain other kinds of software because it was interfering. And I had done an uninstall. You go to Windows, you go to you control and you remove programs. I had done all that, and so finally I just started Googling how do I get rid of this thing? And this term came up, how do you do a clean uninstall? Because when you uninstall something, of course, there are fragments left of the program most of the time. It doesn't completely wipe your hard drive clean of everything that was associated with that program. And so to do a clean uninstall, you have to learn how to be like a scour. You have to scour and know where all of the fragments are left. You think you've gotten rid of the problem, and you think you've gotten rid of the virus or the program, but it still leaves these lingering effects. And so to get rid of it, you have to do what's called a clean uninstall, and you have to know where to look for these things. And so people who have been there before, who've had to try to find where the programs have left fragments of themselves on their hard drive, have to point you to where these things are. And that's the purpose of Sonny and I being on the air tonight, is to try to help folks who've been in this situation, who've extricated themselves from the situation, or who've extricated themselves from family who's been in the situation to some degree, to kind of give some pointers as to where those fragments are still left, where it's really causing damaging effects. And that's why we're here. And principally, I guess it's our family, because when you're married to someone, their problems become your problems. Obviously, because their happiness is, really bound to yours, and you know the history of things, and but principally these are things that have been happening to Sonny. So I suppose the word is invited, even though I abide with him. We share the same residence. I invited him to talk about that, and so that we could share our experience of what happens. It's a cautionary tale, but also just kind of working through how do you deal with it once it happens. So, welcome, I guess is the word, Sonny.
Welcome.
Should we start with your offspring, or should we start with your cousin and your aunt?
Ooh, we should start with my cousin and my aunt.
Okay. So why don't you talk about the nature of your relationship? I think we can. The word that I've used for him before, because I have discussed him on this program before, and I gave him a name, just a false name. The name I gave him was Tony. And we have to give a name for your aunt. I don't know, what can I name? Why don't we call her Val?
Okay.
So why don't you describe what the relationship with Tony, what you thought it was, what it was, and how long it was that way, when it was that way, and then from there go on to what it has become that you realized in the last few days, and then you can talk about how it got that way as a result of this white woman.
Okay. Well, my cousin, and I were closer than my blood sibling growing up. And showed me and introduced me to a lot of things. There's something beeping going on. I don't know what that is.
We can hear that, but I don't think they can hear that. That's just me going on and off the switchboard. And the reason I came back on the switchboard and unmuted myself is because you said there were a lot of years between you. I think it's important for you to say how many years were between you.
About 9 years. About 9 years between us. Being able to get a career and struggling with jobs and struggling with relationships and struggling, period. Signed up. For some reason, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had muted myself. I said I wanted to intervene because I wanted to say that the last part of what you said about the drifting apart, not being able to contact one another, and the bond lessening, I think is 20/20 hindsight. I mean, it's definitely true, but it's hindsight that you've come to understand only within the last week or two, because as recently as the last week or two, you told me that when you saw him, it was just like you'd never been apart, that he's still the same guy, and you guys are just like brothers. But you found out pretty quickly that wasn't the case. And the listeners, loyal listeners or people who have listened to, say, the last 2 or 3 broadcasts probably remember this name Tony coming up before. And in regard to the intense affair of the heart that he had with a black female, that we thought, and I still think, was, if you had to describe the love of someone's life, that's who it would have been. But in between that time, I negotiated them hooking up, and they saw each other. So he was, if you would say, stepping out on the white female, and because I had a relationship with the black female that he was seeing, that he had been the closest to while he was here in San Diego, because people know where we are. I was privy. We became privy to certain information about what was going on in the household of Tony that I'm not sure Tony knows that you know. And that was that consistent with what you're saying, consistent with what Sonny is saying about this white woman, and we have to give her a name too. I don't know what you want to see.
Let's call her Milkshake.
Milkshake, okay. Okay. Milkshake. So, now how am I supposed to keep it straight? All right, I'm trying to be serious about this. Okay. So, Milkshake, according to Tony, is this sort of third hand, but he complained quite a bit to the black lady that, well, he didn't actually complain. What he did is he described. He said that she had some sort of problem. She gets very nervous. She didn't have a diagnosis per se, but she would just trip out and she would not be able to take care of the then 2 children for large periods of time. She would just be down. She'd just be sick. She would have something that no one could diagnose, and it wasn't necessarily physical, but she would just wig out and not be able to do anything, and that placed a lot of stress and strain on him because he had to take care of the children all by himself, and he also had to take care of her, and that when she sensed that he was getting too independent, because he would have an opportunity to travel around the world. Can we talk about that? Why he was traveling around the world, Sonny?
We can talk about that.
Okay. He has been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, MS. And so it's not advanced at all. I mean, you can't see it by looking at him, talking to him. He doesn't walk like it or anything. But because he has the diagnosis and because there are times when, there are some symptoms where he has numbness at his feet and so on, he did qualify to be in a wheelchair basketball league. And the wheelchair basketball league where he's from, and I won't say that part of the world, is like near the best in the world. And he was on one of the top teams, so he's invited to a lot of tournaments and so on around the world to play, and he was one of their star players. So it was in that traveling that he was able to see Sharon, the black girlfriend, but the white woman, the milkshake, would have a sense because of her leash on him and her handle on him that he wouldn't be answering his phone as readily. There's something that she could sense that he was more distant, and so she would become even more needy. She would wig out and want him to come home early, and he would have to fear that his children were not being taken care of. These are the things that happen in between, and so that within the last couple of weeks, when Tony came into town, because his mother is very ill, Val. And that would be Sonny's aunt, right? So Tony's mother, Sonny's aunt, and Sonny's also very close to Val, closer to her than his own mother, for reasons that you can talk about as we begin to talk about this virus thing, And I just say all that to say that to kind of set up the chronology of it. It's not like you knew all along that this thing had been happening, but it's just like when a virus attaches, the more time that goes by, the more files it attaches to on your hard drive. So this time is going by, and everything looks okay, like it's on your hard drive, but it just, some of the things you click work just like they always did, and then all of a sudden, programs that used to work just fine don't work anymore. And so I think suddenly that's what happened with you and Tony. It's just everything looked like it always had been until you clicked a certain icon, and you got a huge surprise. So if we could, you brought up to date that you've drifted it apart, but at this point, 2 weeks ago you didn't know that. So I guess maybe you could describe what happened from the time. Just talk about how at first everything seemed okay, and then bring us up to date to where you are and what this white woman has been able to accomplish.
Okay. So it's quite foreign to the relationship that we had in years back. Was that now I'm echoing.
Oh, you can hear yourself. Okay. Let's see what I can do. Okay. Can you hear yourself now? Just start talking.
I can still hear myself. Maybe you gotta mute yourself.
Okay. Will do.
Okay. And so when I was in that small little town, and so
we do have a try to maintain a basic standard of not cursing on the program, unless it's, absolutely necessary. So, are you feeling like it's absolutely necessary to curse?
Yeah.
All right, go for it.
Anyway, after that, we were separated, pretty much separated, and I was calling my cousin Tony to get moral support, but he couldn't give it to me because he was compromised in his situation, and I didn't understand that, and I thought that was pretty interesting. I thought it was, I was very disappointed, just put it that way, very disappointed, but I didn't tell him that, and I stayed in that state for about 3 years, and I probably called him about 10 times in 3 years, and it would pretty much be the same thing. I never asked him, and I did mention racism. I did mention racism to him, but he never acknowledged that that was the problem. He acknowledged that remotely close to anything that was close to support was that you just need to get out of that town. That town is tearing you up. And I knew then that it wasn't the town, it was the people in the town, specifically the racists who were in that town who wanted me gone. Right? So they did a lot of things. Okay? And I don't know if she was, I didn't know then, but I believe that she was behind those things that got me locked up, got drugs planted on me, from me not obeying her and her getting back at me caused me to get locked up, and from not being able to support myself, I couldn't pay the warrants, eventually got put in jail for that, and when I didn't have a job, I was living in a storage unit. Now remember, I don't think any female would allow their child to live in a storage unit with the other parent. That just goes to show you the viciousness of racist women. She allowed her 3-year-old child to visit me in a storage unit because she wanted a breather. She wanted to do whatever she wanted to do. She wanted time alone. It was a lot of work taking care of a child or whatever. She was too weak to do that, so she passed him off to me, and I was living in a storage unit. Make a long story short about that. Contemplated whether or not I was going to take my child out of that state, but I didn't because I didn't have any way to support the child. So I bounced, all right? I was a fugitive, all right? I bounced as a fugitive because I thought that they were going to put my ass in prison for a very long time because the atmosphere was set up in such a way that they weren't arresting me and they were leaving me alone, and they knew where I was at. They were just waiting for me to make a major slip, and I think she was behind that. So that's just how thick and deep it gets when you're involved with racist women and you try to anyway. I'm no longer a fugitive. Cree helped me resolve that matter many, many years ago, about 6 years ago. But anyway, I'll continue. She's getting scared. Anyway, I'm calling him, and he's not giving me any support. So after all that drama had happened, my view of him didn't change. But I left that town, and in 2004, I saw him again. And his oxyhominoid female handler didn't allow him to spend any time with his family. Okay, fast forward. 2012. Last week, my relative, the one who I spoke about earlier that we're talking about mainly tonight, is still currently in a relationship or in a sexual arrangement, trap marriage with that oxyhominoid white supremacist female that he's with now.
Milkshake, right?
Milkshake. He's with Milkshake. Anyway, my aunt, who is very dear to me and very close to me, suffered a stroke, and he's in town by way of another state. They had to fly her from another state because the hospital wouldn't pay for her medical coverage in that other state, so they had to fly her back to where we all reside, where most of the family reside now. So she was flown back here. He was there with her for a brief time with his sister and whatnot. She was out there helping helping his sister, her daughter, with her situation, and she's got breast cancer. So she was up there helping her in the hospital with her breast cancer, and she catches a stage 10 stroke while she's helping her daughter with her breast cancer. And then she's hospitalized. So now we got two family members hospitalized, both black females. And so they had to fly her out, and then he eventually flies out a week later, and we're reunited again. So he's alone this time, completely alone. He was finally allowed to be released to be with his mother, only on the conditions that he comes back in 2 weeks.
Now, what should also be said is that Val, his mother, Sonny's aunt, had been very ill prior to this. She had had 2 previous strokes, not as severe, but she had had 2 previous strokes and 2 other forms of very serious illness. And during all of that time, his handler, Milkshake, who handled all the finances, which she was not responsible for, and her family is rolling in dough, by the way. She has no job, but her parents only, well, there was never any money, either Tony's money or her family's money, available for him to come visit his mother on any of the previous, during 10-15 years, during any of his mother's previous illnesses. But this time, because it looks like she may be she may be about to pass, Milkshake allows him to leave, but with the proviso, as Sonny said, that he can only be gone for 2 weeks. Under these circumstances, he rarely sees any of his family. He rarely sees his mother. He doesn't even visit her when she's ill, and now she's possibly about to pass into the next dimension, and there's still this handler says, okay, I will let you go, but you be back here in 2 weeks. You take it from there.
Well, while his visit, she was probably in stage 8 from stage 10. Okay, they relieved the pressure from her brain. She was about in stage 8 of her stroke. And wow, this is interesting. I had just gotten back from seeing my son myself, and I was back in town, and I saw my aunt, and then I saw my cousin again, and we had spent some time together in which racism was brought up. I don't necessarily know how it was brought up, but I'm a lot different than I was from 2004 to now because of my studies and my views and my maturity and my understanding of racism, white supremacy. And that's a big part of my life. I mean, it's pretty much the only part of my life now. And, of course, it's going to come out in my thoughts, speech, and action. It's going to come out in my conversations. And I was probably discussing the state of the world, and I was probably using racism, and I was probably using white supremacy, forgetting that, he's coupled with a white female. And he started challenging me and asking me to explain myself about my views. And he didn't believe that racism was global. He thought it was reserved to America. I had to tell him, no, it's not. It's a global system. You know, there are black people all over the world. Therefore, there are white people all over the world. And therefore, somebody got to be a racist sometimes. And if there is a global system of racism, white supremacy, if they do exist all over the world, that means they're practicing it all over the world. And I had to explain that to him. And so we had a big argument over the definition of racism. We had a big argument over who's practicing it. We had a big argument over slavery and black, and he wanted to use the excuse or whatever, his opinion that you don't have to blame white people for everything because black people sold other black people into slavery. And I said, yeah, but who was the masters of the actual trade, and who was behind all of that, and who designated them to, who was in charge of it all? Who made the functional decision? Who's able to functionally practice racism, and who is perpetrating that and following the orders of the racists themselves? And so the conversation went to, so you think that white people are racist? I said, by definition, a racist white supremacist is a white person because we live in a global system of racism, white supremacy. The only people who are able to functionally practice racism are white people. And so he said, so you're saying that my wife is a racist? I said, does she call herself white? He said, yes. And I said, yes. And then he said he was very offended with me. He was very angry with me. He couldn't believe that I would say such a thing. And then he wanted to defend her by saying that she loves him and that she has always been there for him, and that what I was saying is wrong. And he didn't believe me, and I said, that's fine. You do not have to believe me, but you asked me, and I told you what I thought, and I believe that is the truth. And there was nothing he had to say to me after that. Everything went dead silent. We didn't speak to each other the whole ride home, and we went our separate ways for that night. And the next night, he calls me back. The next day, he calls me back and pretends that we never had that conversation, like it was all good and everything was all cool.
Wait, now, in that same conversation, didn't he challenge you? Didn't he say to you, well, what about you? Didn't you have a child with a white woman? Weren't you with a white woman?
Yes, he asked me that, and I said I made a mistake. I was brain trashed at the time. The Union, if I had understood racism, would not have gone that way. I would have made a better choice for my offspring and myself by not engaging in that activity. Overall, the activity was her fault. She knew that it knew next to nothing. And a white supremacist under the system of racism, white supremacy, engaging in sexual relations or activity with a black person is equal to and worse than child molestation. I function as a child compared to her. She functions as an adult compared to me. So why then would any person who functions as an adult engage in sexual relations with those who are equal to a child? It was her fault. Yes, that is what I'm saying. That is my position. That's where I stand. Yes. And he had nothing to say to that, pretty much. And I guess he brought up, I remember him bringing up Malcolm X after that, and he's saying that Malcolm X in the end said that blue eyes, pale skin, straight-haired brothers were our brothers. And he said, haven't you read the book Malcolm X? Don't you know that even he said that in the end they were our brothers? And I said, yes, I have read several books on Malcolm X. Yes, I've done many papers on him, and know that it's really not what he said. What he said is that he would change his views based on the fact that he saw them there in Mecca, so he was confused. I said even Malcolm X was confused in the end, all right? But he still did not sleep and did not go back to sleeping with white females. He didn't do that. So, and he also brought up charges against them anyway, because he was trying to pursue justice and he cared about justice. So the thing is that I won't do the same thing myself. No, sir. And after that, we got in the car. Nothing was said. And that day went by. And the next day, he phoned me up and pretended like the conversation didn't happen. And at this time, things were very different between us, and things were very uneasy between us, and things were not, our union was definitely not the same. It's pretty much diminished, broken, done with. All right? Simply because he can't face it because he still has to go home to that racist.
Yeah, but see, I've noticed that, I think it's, well, I don't know, I think this is a male-female thing. I can't figure out how exactly. But you'll summarize and go to the bottom line. And so, again, I think that's a 2020 thing, because you told me that after that initial conflict, that firestorm, that when you got back together with him, when you came home after that, you said, you know what, everything is squashed. We've made peace. We're good now. Which I wasn't happy about.
No, that was the first time. You're getting it confused. The second time, I was trying to get to that. Actually, what was going on was the second time when he called me, it was he tried to make me feel as though he was under the impression and that I had understood that we both were cool with the situation, even though when we met each other for the second time, that there was still an unspoken silence of uneasiness between us. And the discussion between my aunt's health obviously came up, and we had a disagreement about that. And the disagreement about that was that he was leaving his mother down here too soon, and his excuse for that was because he had no funds to stay down here. I didn't believe that. I think that his handler, Milkshake, was full of resources and could help him stay down here, but she didn't want to stay at home and mammy those children. That was his responsibility. It's basically saying, nigga, you got to come back home. The plantation needs tilling, nigga. I'm not staying here, nigger, and watching these kids. That's your job. I got adult business to do. And
you know what? There's I can hear myself. I'm echoing. There was a conversation where Sonny overheard the conversation. He had her on speakerphone, and she called him she called him from where they live, and she called him out here, and the conversation that we hear chimes in is, he says, "Oh, I know it's really tough on you, isn't it? It's really tough. It's really tough." He says, "Well, I'll be back tomorrow." And she says, "That's not soon enough." Now, here's the thing. There are 2 children. She has no job. You see? So she has no children. She has 2 children. She has no job. She's being asked simply to take care of her own children for 2 weeks without a second parent, something that many people do all the time. And in fact, if Tony were in the Coast Guard and being deployed right now at 4 months at a time, she would have to do. But she was exactly saying to Tony what Sonny said. She was saying, which is, "That's your job, nigger." And this is something that I have seen over and over and over again as I've looked at these couples, particularly black male white female. When we're out and about, and one of the places that you see them the most out here in San Diego is at the zoo, at the San Diego Zoo. It's almost like, this biodiversity, and so you see all of this sexual sewering and sexual arrangements of black female, white male, and the other, the converse, all over the place. But with the black male and the white female, it's always the male who, you can tell, has primary charge of the children. Like, it's always a role reversal where he's feminized. He's doing the hair, even if it's little girls, he's doing their hair. He's holding the children. He's disciplining them. Most of the time, if there are two or more children, the black male is holding one and he's pushing the stroller, and the white woman is just walking about. She might put her hand on the stroller once or twice, but she's just walking about, maybe talking with her other white relative, but it's like he is the nanny. And that's exactly the position that Tony's in, but he's not trying to leave his handler.
Yeah, that's the truth. One of the reasons why I separated with my handlers, because she tried to make me, feminize me by making me the primary caretaker. And since I wasn't going for that, then the relationship dissolved very quickly. But anyway, and this is something I really, really, really regret, and I don't like it. It's the reason why I don't see family members in their places of residence at all, if often or at all, is because there were children around at that house that we were at when he was down here, and when we were having this conversation, that turned into an argument of all things. And we're not supposed to even be arguing with other black males or females, period, at all. Okay? That's the point of codification. Now, because the issue was sensitive to him, he did something that was very immature and out of character, something that he would never do if it was any other argument about any other topic. But since it was the argument of the topic of racism, and he was the symbol of that example of the one who was being used and abused, that he didn't want to admit to being used and abused about, that the kids heard it, and he went into the living room and was yelling, and the kids had to hear that. My brother's children had to hear that. And I was so upset about that, because I ain't never heard nothing like that before. Always kept those kind of conversations away from them. Not about racism, but about the yelling and the confrontation, the promoted confrontation in front of them. All right? They don't know nothing about no adult business. And they heard that stuff. And it was only because he walked out into the living room, because he got called on his stuff, and brought my brother into it. In the living room, the kids were there. So I walked I was like, oh man, I know he just didn't do that. So I walked into the living room and I was like, man, look, if you got something to say to me, you can come say it to me in private. There ain't no reason why kids don't need to hear this. They don't need to know nothing about this. They don't know nothing about this. Let's go outside and talk. But anyway, and we did, eventually. We did. He didn't get up. He didn't get up. I got up. I walked out, and I called Cree on the phone. And then they sent my nephew out there to check on me to see what I was doing.
Okay, but see, the missing piece here is, why did he feel like...
I'm getting to that.
Okay.
I'm getting to that. Okay? Well, what was said before he walked from the kitchen where we were talking into the living room to repeat what we were saying was that I felt as though I should say something about the fact that he couldn't stay longer. And I said, I think that you leaving next week is not a good idea. I don't think that you should leave. I think and I know that you know that, but I think your mom needs you. I would like for you to stay a little bit longer. And he interrupted me because I was going to tell him, I think, and you probably do have the money. I'm not calling you a liar. I'm just saying, can't your milkshake wife let you off the leash just for a little bit longer so you can tend to your sick, dying mama? And he interrupted me and told me, you know, you don't know what it's like being me. You don't know what it's like being a father. I don't want to leave. What do you expect me to leave my kids? How long do you expect me to leave my kids for? A month? 2 months? 5 months? A year? And I said, yeah, leave for a year, okay? But I switched up, and he was like, a year, and I was like, man, maybe not a year, but maybe just like, at least like a few months, maybe 5 at the most. 5 months. You really expect me to leave my kids for 5 months? I said, man, if it means the life of your mom, yes. Yes. Leave your kids for 5 months, yes. It's not like they ain't never going to know their daddy's like, who's going to take care of them? I said, Kathy, Milkshake is going to take care of them. You know what I'm saying? And he said he wasn't trying to hear it. Then he challenged me and changed the subject and said, if that was your mom, how long would you stay? Would you actually stay for a year? And I told him yes, because that's the truth. I would. And so he turned around and he walked out into the living room, and then he repeated that to my brother, and then he repeated it loud. And then, you know, he started talking about it, and then he stopped, and that was like when I had to walk out there and ask him to not do that. So can we please go outside and have this discussion? And then when that did not work, they sent my nephew out there to get me, and I walked back in, and shortly after that, you know, I asked if, you know, can you just give me a ride home? You know, you could stay here, but I'm ready to go. Can you just give me a ride home?
Okay, back up. This is what I was saying. Oh, there's a cat staring right in the house. It scared the freaking daylights out of me. Gosh. Okay. It's very hot here, so we have to have the doors open. No, what I wanted to get to was, why did he feel that he would have support? That's critical. The missing piece is, why did he feel like he would have support by going out into the living room where your brother was? Why did he feel that your brother would be a source of backup for him in this issue where he's feeling vulnerable about how feminized he is vis-a-vis this white woman? Why did he feel like, you know, and any other time he would never go to your brother for support because your brother was never around. It was always the two of you that were close. He and your brother were never close. But in this particular instance, he very uncharacteristically went for your brother, expecting support from him, and got it in the form of silence from your brother, which I'm sure didn't surprise you. It didn't surprise me. And I mean, I think that, you know, it's worth saying why it was that he could expect that sort of support in the form of silence from your brother.
Well, because both of them have wives that are not black.
Right.
So females who are not black are not going to have sympathy for a sick black mother in a hospital. If there's any support that he would get, it would probably be from my brother, whom has an Asian, Oriental type looking wife. Now, she can be classified as white in my opinion. She behaves and acts like she is white, therefore I classify her as white. She is white relative to me, therefore I classify her as white. Okay? Her behavior towards me is hostile. She's very much like a white creature, and I do classify her as white. Okay? So let's get that out there. My cousin was there as well, and he swoons over white females, Asian females, and Asian females. That's who he wants to give his heart to. He always fights me on issues of racism, white supremacy, and none of them, and I mean none of them, like black females, okay? So that's the piece that's missing. So that's why he went out into the living room and got that support, or attempted to get that support from those two male family members that were sitting in the living room. So when he did that, he got support in the way of silence, but he asked the question again. Sonny, if it was you and your mother was in a hospital and you had a family to go to, would you leave them for 5 months and stay with your mother? And I said in front of all of them, yes. Dead silence. You can hear a pin drop. Nobody said anything. And the reason why they didn't say anything, because in 2011, the whole family knows that when my mother was in ICU, when a machine was breathing for her for a whole week, I didn't leave that hospital. I stayed night and day in that hospital. And I made sure, with my limited knowledge, that I knew what was going on, because at any time, if that machine didn't work, my mother was dead. And I wanted to be there for her. Her life meant something to me. She means something to me. So yes, I told them yes, and they didn't say anything. Had I not done that, maybe they would have piped up and had their opinions about it. Maybe they would have jumped on me and bashed on me. But was my brother there? No. He came and got me, and I was there for her. So none of them said anything about that. And shortly after that, the night was over and we all went home.
Okay. So, the thing is I'm not sure exactly where to go from here. Where I want to skip to is sort of this, the acceptance of mistreatment of black family members, black kinfolk, black blood relatives, because of the need to satisfy the white partner. There's this all-around acceptance that it's okay. They're excused, and it's more than excused. It's like it's almost like it's understood. This is a price that we pay for us, and they use the term explicitly in Brazil, for us improving the race, which means whitening up our progeny. So it's as his mother does not hold him accountable. His stepfather does not hold him accountable. No one in the family holds him accountable, or more to the point, no one in the family holds the white woman accountable for what she's doing, because they think what she's doing is a positive thing, no matter how much she mistreats her quote-unquote husband, her black husband. The fact of the matter is that she injected 50% of her genes, on average, into the offspring, and because she did that, she's forgiven for everything. And so, stroke or no stroke, breast cancer, no breast cancer, everything is okay. And anyone who stands up to that and says that's not okay, and it's not because, and is only doing it, not looking for an argument, but only doing it because they sincerely care about their dear one, becomes the enemy. And so, as much as you want to do the right thing, the thing that's in the best interest of your dear one, you realize that we've discussed it for quite a while, because we know that there's nobody here who feels confident enough or who cares enough about the life of Val to ask questions of the caregivers, of the physicians, of the nurses, and so on. We know that there's nobody here to do that, and so this is why we wanted Tony to stay. We knew that there was nobody, and when he made his decision that he was going to go, between Sonny and I, we talked about, well, what can we do to help? Because we sincerely care, because this lady has been there for us at a time when we really needed just someone, and she was the only one that was there for us. And she's always been the one who's cared about him more so than his mother, which has been a problematic relationship for him throughout his life. And but we realized that the hole that had been dug, when we looked at the whole pattern of behavior, even of his mother, in not ever saying anything or wanting to even wonder as to why her son couldn't break free to come see her when she was ill on previous occasions, and not caring that her grandson that she sacrificed everything for, the other cousin that Sonny was talking about that was in the room, that wants to give his heart to anybody but a black female, never questioning that he would never come to see about her, even in the same town. We realized that there was a fence put up around. When people don't acknowledge racism, even if they're your dear ones, it becomes a fence with barbed wire that is electrocuted, and you really can't get over it. You can make plans to throw these high-tech ropes around, over it, and try to distract the guard at the guard tower and somehow get in to do this heroic rescue or save of your dear one, but it really is an impossible task, and that even if you were to somehow manage it, they would still hold you as the enemy. So even when they recover, you become the enemy and you become the meddler. And the wisdom that I think we learned is that people, because of their value systems, they're as what is called white identification, make choices, and they make them time and time and time and time again. And either people are predisposed to, you can use a lot of metaphors that have to do with religion, predisposed to hearing the truth, to hearing the good news, and the good news is that there's something that explains all this madness and we can now address the problem. And I don't know what accounts for why some people are open to hearing it and some people are not, irregardless of background and age. But some people are. And regardless of the situation that they may have dug themselves into, they're open to hearing it, and they will make strides. You can see some willingness on their part to at least discuss it and not get angry. They may not be willing to make changes in their lives at that point, but they will admit that they are trapped. They will admit that there is a system. And over time, that admission changes their behavior. But some people just are seemingly incapable of doing that. And if you try to get them to see otherwise, it just brings more drama upon you and more stress upon you, and it's just not a good thing. You don't need conflict between black people anyway. And then there's all this heartache and all this trauma and stress where people are making charges, and then next thing you know, this is how you end up with seeing black people suing each other, family members, blood relatives suing each other in court. We finally made the decision that we can't turn people's hearts. If it's been repeatedly shown, you have to cut ties, and it causes isolationism. But more and more, what I'm hearing as I listen to people various places on internet, radio, Facebook. Don't see too much of it in my real time. Don't see any of it. But I see people becoming more equally yoked, and I don't know that we're going to have a collection of people who are residing in proximity to one another, but at least I'm seeing more and more people being able to just rely on each other. It does make for an isolation. In a sense, you like to have more support for your partnership, but you're not likely to get it. But you're very fortunate if you do at least have that. I really don't know what to say to people who are single in that situation, but I am saying that it can be a lost cause, but it doesn't have to be, because in the same way that you've got Tony, you've got Sonny. Similar situations, different paths. In the same way that, actually, I don't know any black females right now who are with white men, but the same way that there are those who will never break away, there's me. It's not irreparable. It can change, but you don't. If they don't have an ear for it, and I would say immediately, which doesn't mean that they'll make changes immediately, But if they don't have an ear for it immediately without the denial, you don't press it. And I don't care if it's kinfolk or not. And the thing is that racism, white supremacy is so encompassing that you should not assume that your bond, your deep bond with someone, whether it's a friend that you had from years ago or a blood relative, you should not assume that somehow that will transcend that subject of racism, because it may transcend everything else. But the one thing it will never transcend, it can even transcend religion. One person is Muslim and the other person can be Christian or an Israelite or an atheist, what have you. I've seen friendships endure despite differences in the outlook on the Creator. Seen it numerous times. I have not one time seen a relationship, whether it was father, son, mother, daughter, cousins, brothers, siblings. I've not seen one relationship endure when the fundamental difference is an understanding of racism, white supremacy. Not one. And this is a cautionary tale. Don't expect it to, because if you do, you could just be in for a minefield, and suddenly you will become even more of the bad person, the villain in your family of origin, than if you had just kept your mouth shut. Our household policy, and we even just came up with a new one today. But our household policy hasn't necessarily been always adhered to by close kin. But our household policy, we tell people we don't visit people at their places of residence because we know it's likely to be non-constructive and lead to conflict, especially given our wide differences in opinion on the most basic subject of our existence. So folks know pretty much not to come by here. They know pretty much not to expect us to come by their places. But there are times when folks, if they can't get a hold of us by phone, screen calls, and we don't think it's as important as they do, they will, try to, knock the door down. They will just drop by. And anticipating that this was going to happen, we changed voicemail today to say, greetings, hope you have a nice day. Please leave a message. If you feel it is something that needs to be done in person, please leave a message to that effect, and wait until we call you back and arrange an appropriate time, which means don't just stop by, because we have to determine whether or not it's something that is going to be constructive. Sonny was accused by his mother of being estranged from the family. Do you want to speak to that, Sonny?
Well, my mother knows that I used to be very, very, very family-oriented, and I did a lot of work coming up to make sure that family was together for Thanksgiving or a meeting or a huddling up or to play some games, just to talk about family issues, just to have fun. But as time went by and as I started understanding more about how the world worked and the quote-unquote estrangement started, I was accused of being militant. I was accused of being a little bit too opinionated. And then I met you. And then through knowing you, the language became more precise. The behavior became a little bit more pronounced, and my views became a little bit more focused, to where there was no more accusations being called, but there was just more silence than anything, because you can't deny a person being weird or unconstructive or out of the ordinary when most of the times that you see them, they're trying to solve a problem And after the problem is solved, you don't see them at all. So, as time passed and the behavior persisted to be consistent in that way, people really don't have that much to say to you. And they will never tell you what they truly think about you in terms of it being very positive, or in a way that they used to view you, that you no longer behave in that way anymore. And it's very hard for them to view you for who you are in the present time, especially if you were a scapegoat in that particular family like I was. So, since I'm no longer the young one, the silly one, the funny one, the goofy one, I'm no longer the one who seems to be overly angry or militant. I'm no longer the one who it's easy to put the blame on, but who's trying to mature and trying to become a man. You never thought that I would be that person. And you never thought that I would do it so well. And you never thought that I would make a decision to get with a female like Cree. Okay? So, all these things being said and all this behavior being exhibited, they don't know what to do with you. They don't know where to place you, and they cannot put you in a category that they can point a finger at you justly and say that you fit in this box. They cannot do that anymore. So they become like zombies. They have not very much to say to you because they fear you or revere you, or they definitely don't want to run to you for advice because that's not the way things worked. That's not the way things used to work. And they can't bring themselves to, for some reason, to ask you questions on how you became the person that you are today.
Well, I think one of the things that Tony said during that very heated conversation that you had with them is very telling and instructive about the reason that they can't ask questions or come to terms with, even try to come to terms with the become curious about why you've taken the position that you've taken. And he said to you, well, if there wasn't white supremacy, then black people would just be running around like savages and animals, and there would be chaos. Didn't he say that?
Oh man, he did.
And so I think that sense of
self-hatred.
Yeah, that sense of I guess self-hatred is somewhat descriptive, but I think it's more of a sense of not being able to ever conceive of a situation in which white people would not be in charge, that they should be in charge, and that it would be a very unsafe place to be without them being in charge. The way caged animals are afraid to leave their cages, and so the idea of the rebel slave, or the rebel slave coming around saying let's leave, is they just don't want any part of it. They don't even want to hear it. They don't want to start a conversation about it. They don't even want to have a conversation that could possibly lead there. Now what they want is they want you to come back in the cage so they can talk to you. But they don't want you to stand at the door of the cage and beckon them out. They don't want you to stand near the door where you could possibly try to beckon them out. They're afraid that if simply being near you while you stand near the door could get them in trouble, because they believe that where they are is the safest place to be, because they cannot conceive of anything else. That sense of, and I very rarely use this term, because I don't think that it's the definition of racism, white supremacy. I don't think that a sense that one type of person is inferior to another is an accurate description of what the system is, because the system is about power, and one of the effects of that power is that feeling sometimes always genuine in us and not always genuine in white folks, but they will pretend that it is. So I don't think that's the description of it, but I will use the term inferior. That sense of inferiority that has been foisted on us is one where you become a dangerous person for even questioning it, because basically it's saying, I am by nature, a paraplegic, and you are threatening to get my wheelchair taken away. And of course, if you really needed that wheelchair, you'd be furious at a person for advocating that everybody stand up. You'd be furious. You'd be scared to death of them. And I at this point, I have no explanation for what makes the difference between the person who realizes that their legs just need some exercise, and and they could work, and that they could leave the cage, and those who can't. I don't have an explanation for that. It may be something biological. I don't know. But, the residual effects of being with a white person makes it even more difficult to try to even talk to people who have been with one. There's a lot of hard drive cleaning. There's just there's these little folders that you have to clean up. There are all these people who witnessed this, who've seen you change, but you still have to address that you were with them, and you still have to go back and you have to explain. As I said at the top of the program, these little programs, you have to explain to all these people who witnessed you do that why you changed your mind, because they're not going to understand why. They're not going to see it at all. All they're going to see is that you left a good thing, which is largely what his family thinks about the choice that he made, especially in terms of being with me. They all had dreams of being able to put photos up on their wall of his white wife and, the hybrid child. So they're really angry at me because I'm in the picture when, in their mind's eye, they see a white woman. And to boot, I'm not light-skinned. Although better looking than all their wives by far, and I hate to, it's not a bragging thing, but I mean, come on. And then sometimes I even think that they're envious of Sonny for that, is that they've chosen the light skin over something that would be more physically appealing. So they're almost angry at him for that, like they're angry that they've made the choice that they've made. It's a really convoluted sort of thing. But you do have to go back and you do have to address it, or if you ever intend to express your views about racism at all, you still have to go back and you have to address in some sort of detail how it was that you got into the situation that you were in with this white person that you were sexually involved with at one point, and why you left. You have to explain that, because otherwise it just seems entirely hypocritical. And you just can't. You can't think that. Or sometimes you don't necessarily think that your actions speak for themselves. You just forget that it has to be explained. But it does have to be explained. And that is an opportunity to find out how open they are to it. If they're not open to hearing about such an important decision that you made in your life, about your personal, very, very personal, intimate decisions, then you know right there. If they don't have an immediate open ear to that, they soon, they transition from being a dear one. You have a very small circle.
Yeah, I never thought that would happen at all. I mean, that was never in my mind. That was never anything that I could ever conceive of. But that's just my own sense of thinking, just because he's a family member, that he's special and that he's not like other people off the street. And intellectually, I know that that's not true, but I just had to find out the hard way. And I know it now, and I understand it now. It's just that I would never even engage in that kind of conversation with an individual who was in an arrangement with a white person. I would have never done that if it was someone else. But, mostly people who are in an arrangement with a white person, they wouldn't ask the question anyway. It probably wouldn't go that far. And that's true, because he wouldn't have had I not been a family member. We probably wouldn't even have talked very long anyway, now that I reflect on it. But we did, and the conversation went exactly the same way that it would go had he been just a black male off the street. His views would have been the same as they were. His responses to my statements and my questions would have been the same as any other black male off the street. I've seen it time and time again. And so as it was with him. But I didn't think that afterwards he'd be very angry and very quiet and have nothing to say to me afterwards. I didn't think that that would happen. I didn't expect that to happen. That was the surprise. And now I know.
You mentioned about them sending your little nephew out to talk to you instead of wanting one of them coming out to talk to you, correct?
Correct.
During that real heated conversation. The interesting thing about the nephew is that the nephew, you can go back and look at one of the earlier talks explaining the polygenetic nature of skin color. The nephew, we had spoken about him in that broadcast. The nephew looks like a little black boy, even though his mother is a very, very, very pale-skinned Chinese Filipina. Not very little Malay ancestry in her. She looks like a very pale Chinese woman, a fat one. I take some pleasure in saying that. And his brother is much, much lighter skinned than him, than Sonny. And the nephew came out much darker than either one of his parents. The nephew is about as dark as Sonny, maybe a little darker. And so the nephew has always had an affinity for Sonny. He's the only one in the family who's welcoming of him. He's about 11 years old now. And so instead of either one of these males who are married to non-black females coming out to take care of, mature business, they, like children, sent out a youngster. And very, very weak. Very, very weak. And in their minds, I mean, I don't know. I suppose, I'm not sure what they think, because he did have this background of being the militant one and all of that before he and I got together. But I think in their minds, they think in some way, it's really interesting because they see me as the villain. They think that I've changed him, that if were it not for me, he would not be behaving this way. Of course, they never look at themselves and say, were it not for this non-black woman that you've married, there would be a lot more harmony in the family. But as it is now, the Asian part of his brother's family doesn't want. His brother knows that his wife does not want the black people around, and of course that has rubbed off on the children. So no one, neither Sonny's mother nor Sonny feel comfortable in that house. And so, there can be no gatherings of any kind of, whether it's constructive work or not. That everything is very uncomfortable. Even just going out to watch a Pop Warner football game, when his brother's family will go out to the black side of town and then sit apart, make a total seating area apart from the bleachers so that they don't have to be with the black folks, and so that they don't have to say hello to the black relatives who come in to see the nephew play. I mean, these are the types of things that happen when you marry non-black. And so for me, the paradigm, I've said it a long time ago, is not white, non-white. It's black, non-black. I think that's the way the world works. And so, I become this villain, and they think that somehow he can't make up his own mind, that these are not his views, that these are not views that he shares with me, and that's why we're together. It's easier for them to villainize me. I don't know.
But I do believe it's that. And I also want to say that it was very weak for them to send my nephew out to talk to me to see how I was doing or what I was doing. They knew I was doing just fine, but the thing was is that if you ain't man enough to come out here and face me, but to send your nephew, damn, that's weak, man. And first of all, that's what does that show your son? It shows that you can't even deal with his brother like a man. You can't even be a man when it counts.
But then,
you know what I mean?
But then that was a really important moment for him to see because he's very aware of the fact that he's browner skinned.
Right, I was getting to that.
So what he saw is that his father, the one thing that his father, his attempted father, cannot stand up and be a man about, he's got a lot of big muscles and stuff, but he can't deal with the issue of racism.
Well, he never can, and the thing is that if I'm ever around, which I hardly am, and I discuss anything that I see on television when I see them watching it, which they do frequently, that I mention that this person right here is being mistreated like that because they are black. And no, I won't play black ops with you because I don't like, or zombie because I don't like the fact that they're killing black people on the video game. Nor do I play video games, period, but since I'm with you and this is something you can relate to, and I'm in your house on your turf, yes, I will play them with you to talk to you. So that's just a way of just communicating with you. You know, that's just on that level, but he knows, my nephew knows. I've explained my views to him about racism, and he understands what an 11-year-old understands, and I understand how to make it as clear to him in his 11-year-old brain as clear as possible. Now, he knows his father doesn't talk about it, and he knows that his mother mistreats him. How do I know? Because he tells me that she does. He told me that she made him wash the car while it was raining outside. Now, that's mistreatment. I told him that. And the thing is that I told him you get mistreated because you're not Asian. They don't accept you as that. You are not white. They function as white, and you are not white.
And it's the same situation with that family, wherein this is an Asian quote unquote wife, but your brother does all of and your brother's like the super jock football player, right? But he does all of the child care. He really does spends all the time with the children. He's expected to do that. It's like these females pop out these black babies, or these babies that they view as black or not, you know. I suppose if they're light-skinned enough, then they become the favored ones. I have a nephew that...
And that strong, masculine, stiff, steel-ass hand rubbing ever so gently that straight hair to put it in a ponytail when the other Asian children are around. So you strong. Oh, you tough. You mean. But when I see you, I see you doing hair, Negro. What you doing hair for?
He does all the child care. he makes all of the play dates. He does all of that stuff because they don't want anything to do with it. They really don't. They don't. These non-black mothers don't want to spend as much time with these children.
No, they don't want to spend that much time with the children, and they are in competition with the children if they are female. Like, you know, my niece, she's about 16 now, and her mother neglects her. She encourages her to get fat, and she does not help her watch her weight because she's in sexual competition with her, and she knows that. She's a stressed out teenager who lives like she's close to 28 years old. She hasn't been allowed to be a child, and she hasn't been allowed to be a female. Some big time competition with her. But that's how it is.
Yeah.
Inside of the family, inside of my particular family structure. It is that way with a lot of people who are in families where the black male has offspring with an Asian female, and the Asian female is in sexual competition with the mulatto offspring female daughter. It's that way with them. I've seen it over and over again.
Well, I don't.
And my cousin, he also does the hair of his golden hybrid daughter. Now, would he be doing the hair if he was with a black female and had an offspring with her, had a seed with her? No, he would not be doing it. He wouldn't be invested in that child's hair.
Well, another conversation we'll talk about the numerical dominance, that the numerical advantage in terms of propagation of our phenotype that we're assumed to have on this planet. We've on this program before talked about the supposed genetic dominance of black genetics, and I think we've disposed of that pretty thoroughly. That's not true. But what remains is the numerical dominance. So that, as one would say, that neither the tea bag nor the clear water is dominant. It's a matter of how much is to one. You can certainly bleed out the tea out of the bag. The same is true with skin color and the other genetics. It's just a matter of amount and quantity. So that takes care of the genetic dominant argument. And if you wanted to hear my explanation and treatise on that, certainly just look through the archives and you'll be able to find them. But the numerical dominance is one that still is one that needs to be discussed. And on an upcoming program at some point we'll discuss that. But I think we're losing the battle on that too. There is a way, if it's done methodically, to do away with the cut away at that numerical dominance. And I'll discuss that maybe on another program. So this was another program that's still dealing with the area, the 8th area of people activity, according to the code book, sex, and just knowing that it's the horrible gift that keeps on giving, and you want to make sure that you clean your files, and sometimes that means cutting off relationships with people that you held dear, but it certainly means explaining your position and what you went through and why you went through it and why you changed, and either they can deal with it or they can't, and very quickly. It's not something that it's like when you give a medicine to someone. If you take a medicine yourself, you know whether or not it's working within 45 minutes to an hour. So if it doesn't work within that time period, it's not going to work. And I know no other remedy for it. So it's just cut ties. And if anybody else has a different experience, you let me know. But I'm not seeing it. Grandparents are very stubborn. Grandparents won't see that they're being ignored and left like so much dust because it's too painful for them to see it. So
yeah, and another thing about that too, concerning the different the generational gaps, and the coupling of either black male, black female, who are in a sexual arrangement and have offspring with people who are not black, and also those who are white, is one of the major problems with that is that there will be no discussion on the mistreatment that they receive from their white counterpart. And what is mostly damaging that I've noticed within my own family structure is the secrets that they will keep, the secrets that they know they can't tell their children, by doing them a major disservice by not telling them that they disagree with what either the white parent is doing to them and the children, because the white parent is dominating and holding all the cards to their livelihood, and the quote-unquote non-white, non-black parent as well. I just call them low echelon white, that what they're doing is not spoken about to other family members, because family members have the power to not only just address the situation, but they will repeat these words and they will get back to them. They harbor the secrets that will bring to the front table of the actual deeds that are being done that are very negative, bad, evil, that the white parent and the lower echelon white parent is doing. And so by the
well, like I think for
not
for
hold on, let me finish this. By not talking about it, or you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because if you do talk about it, you're going to get punished in some sort of way, because it's going to get back to that parent. And if you talk about it, it's going to help, right? But the person who is talking about it is usually going to have to go through the pain of the negative opinions of most of the family members who are stranglehold and threatened by the dominance of that white parent and lower echelon white parent. But usually, the reason why that lower echelon white parent is even in the family and the white parent is either in that family is because of the thinking of the black person is in agreement with the grandparent about choosing this mate. They both want this white parent in the family structure.
Yep.
And on top of that, see, I didn't know, but they knew. And since I was kept out of a lot of family secrets, that they had this agreement and they were all okay with it, whether it be because of self-hatred or whatnot. Now, they didn't speak about that because of the secrets that I'm talking about. If you have self-hatred, you don't address it, but it plays out because of who you're going to choose in a mate. And it's because of something that you have beef with based on the parenting that you received and the way that your parents looked and presented themselves to you, to your friends throughout time. But if they don't talk about it, then the situation will never get resolved, and it will play out in a very, very terrible way as to choose the lower echelon white person as a mate, or a white oxyhominoid person as a mate. And me being who I was, because I was brain trash too, I chose a white person. Well, they chose me, but I went along with it. And the thing was is that I had that brain trashing when I went along with it. But the difference is that I was willing to rid myself of the problem because I knew I had one. That was the difference. I knew I had a problem, and I was willing to talk about it with someone who was ready to listen. But unfortunately, I didn't have the family members to talk to it to. But I had a friend who I could talk to the situation with, and eventually got with that friend, and we're together today. Now maybe I'm blessed, maybe I'm very lucky. I believe that I am both of those things. Divine intervention, you can say that too, because the problem is just that bad. Because so many of us harbor those secrets, and so many of us are caught up, captive. It's very serious, and we're all captives in that way. So it's very difficult to have someone to relate to you about the problem and tell you that you do have a problem and you need to address it and you need to change. So by changing, I found out that how difficult it is to even have a relationship with those who've made those decisions as well. Because once you make the decision, they got you, especially if you have offspring. They got you because they know that you're going to care about the offspring. So the pattern of it is that when they make the decision to have a racist man and a racist woman as a mate, usually the damage has been done already, and that most of the family members in some way or form can have been brain trashed to contribute to that decision. And most of the time, they all agree with it, and they go along with it, and they do what they're told based on that decision that they made.
And they encourage it. I know that's what happened in my case and in my sister's case. It's difficult to talk about how my father encouraged it, but he did. I think he encouraged it by example, and he encouraged it by not warning us, by not discouraging us, which I find very sad. I feel very sad about that. But my mother, explicitly encouraged it. It's like any argument that my sister and I had at the beginning or any time during that arrangement, so-called relationship with the white men that we were with, she always took the white men's side. She was so desperate. I remember something similar with J-Lo when she was she's now white, I think. But when she wasn't white at that time, I remember when she was being totally just humiliated by Ben Affleck. But her mother was so desperate for her to be with this white guy. And this is how my mother was. Just the encouragement to go and just be totally mistreated, but just looking forward to having that white person be in your family tree. It's just horrid. But when I interrupted, when you were talking about the secrets that are being kept by the grandparents about how their children are being mistreated by the white mates, it's like I thought, well, how about giving an example? For instance, your aunt Val, she knew that Kathy had enough money because she'd been visiting up there, and she knew that they had the funds. She knew that it wasn't right that her son didn't come see her when she had those previous strokes. She knew that was totally uncalled for, and that would have never happened had he had a black mate. But she never moaned or groaned or complained about it to anybody. That's
right.
The secret that she kept. Your mother knows that she is not allowed to have access to her grandchildren, with your brother's children. She knows that she's kept away from important events, or that she's not invited to participate in planning for certain things. She knows that. She knows she's uncomfortable, that nobody talks to her when the very few events that she gets invited to. But she never moans. She never complains about it, because all these things are enabling these relationships, because they think this is a small price to pay for improving their horrid black genetics. And I say to those people, you could have those feelings about yourself, and we've had a program about this. We've spoken about this before. I think LBM and I talked about it. But I don't know what to do about it. If you feel that way, and it's okay for you to say to yourself that it's okay for you to feel that way about it, and to not even make any preliminary steps to rid that self, I don't know, to rid yourself of it. I don't know what to do with that. I have an angry sense about it. I know I should not have an angry sense about it, but it's, I don't know. I know it feels sort of elitist to say, well, maybe they're just weeds that have to be cut, but maybe that's not the right metaphor. But like I said, you don't waste a whole lot of time with it. Either they have an open ear to it. For me, my father kind of was a contradiction. I think his contradiction was simply that he did not understand the system of racism and white supremacy, but he was always aware of it. And because he was always aware of it, I have been aware of it since I can, remember really being able to put 5 sentences together, or maybe 10. From the age of 5, my dad was always talking. Racism was the primary subject in our house every single day, and throughout the time that I grew up. So I was really, aware of it, and I guess many people will have called me militant. Now, we didn't have an understanding of it as a system. My father's understanding of it, and therefore my understanding of it, was this idea that black people were of inferior intelligence and inferior, perhaps inferior appearance. It was this idea of inferiority, and it was about his understanding of it and my understanding of it until I understood the system by way of reading the work of Neely Fuller and thinking about it more and more myself. That was my understanding of it. And so given that kind of understanding, one does think that it's progress when a white person is willing to date you or / marry you. And so I understand where that encouragement was. But nevertheless, I still understood when who this person was who was supposed to be my mate. I still understood when they were doing these things that didn't make sense. I still understood when they were doing things that were mistreating me or were mistreating some other black person. And I knew what was happening, and I challenged it every single time. It made for a very contentious relationship, and you say, well, why did you stay with the person that you were fighting with all the time? Brain trashing. But when I was presented with the information, through another person who presented the information to me. This person is now deceased, and Sonny knows about that. And I don't know the circumstances under which he terminated his own existence. But he introduced me to the code book. But when I was introduced to that work, I knew the situation that I was in, and in the same way that he was tolerant of me, I was tolerant of Sonny. Not to say that when Sonny and I first started out, we were just friends, and so Can I say that that when Sonny, I was open to hearing what he really thought about things. I didn't shut him down when he said, he was very honest with me about what his preferences were in terms of the way that females looked, and I explained to him why he had those preferences. But he didn't fight me. I didn't upbraid him for them. I simply explained to him why he had them and explained to him, how the system had installed those on him. But he never, it was a very calm conversation, and he wasn't contentious with me about it. He wasn't being defensive. He didn't fight me about it. He had an open ear to it. Same thing with me. When it was introduced to me by this guy named David, I knew the situation that I was in, and he presented it to me, and when I read the book, I had to say, this makes all the sense in the world. When I heard Neely Fuller talk, it made all the sense in the world. Now, I wasn't contentious with anyone about it. I didn't try to debate the obvious. Just like Sonny was in the position that he was in, and he had to go through his transformation, I was in the situation that I was in, and I had to go through my transformation, but at no time did either of us deny the truth that was being presented. And I'm saying that that's the difference. You can look at a person in the situation, but when you present to them the information, either it finds an easy ear or it doesn't. And if it doesn't find an easy ear, I say cut your losses, because you're going to be in for a lot of pain. But then again, you don't have to take my word for it,
Right. So. And another thing that I could speak to is that my family members on that tip, and I know they have a lot in common with the rest of the population of black people, and is that they think when in Rome they can do what the Romans do, but they can't because they're not Romans, and they don't understand that they cannot do what the racists do because they're not white. They think that they can, and they find out that they can't, and they don't talk about it because they don't know how they cannot be, and they don't know what to do about it. So therefore, if you're talking about it, how would you know what to do about it? You see what I'm saying? Why would they want to listen to anyone, especially somebody who they consider as a scapegoat, who's actually trying to figure it out? Why would I listen to him embark on this and explain things that we're not even trying to even be black? We don't even care about that. We're trying to assimilate and change because we think that by doing that we can rid ourselves of the problem. But they don't want to hear about the fact that they can't, because they can never be an oxyhominoid. They can never be a white person. So the thing is that you get to a point to where if you can't do anything about problem, if you can't do anything to if you don't even want to hear that you can't do anything about the problem, then you become caught in a deeper state of mind of a prison, because you can't do anything about it. But and then you trick yourself into believing that you don't even want to do anything about it because you want to assimilate out of being black. And that's the interesting thing about that. I don't know if that is exactly how they think, but the thing is that based on how they behave and what they don't want to hear will cause them to believe in a paradox paradigm just like that. Like to be double trapped, triple prisoned, and to talk about it means that you're reminding me that I'm in a double trap and a triple prison. But the thing is that I'm trying to do the same things that the races have told me to do, is do the same things that they do in order to get out of this prison. But the thing is that they don't even want to accept the fact that they're not white, because they can't conceive of being black and doing the same things that white people do.
See, like all that, what you said, the triple paradox, triple prison, paradox, paradigm, and everything. What it is that when you begin to even address the situation, they feel their own craziness, and then they then project that craziness onto you.
I see.
So that's how you become the scapegoat. Because I'm the same thing in my family, as you know. I'm the person that, man, I was shocked. I was absolutely astounded. This is many years back now, but I was very hurt that my own mother would say I found out that my mother told my sister that she needed to keep her children away from me, that I was dangerous.
Wow.
That I had, you probably don't remember me saying that, that I say crazy things, that I say dangerous things. And you have to understand, I never walked around quoting Malcolm X, or, I didn't quote Neely Fuller, but I did give her a CD to listen to. And, but to be regarded in that way. So you become the crazy one. And so then several years, maybe a few years go down the road, and I walk into my mother's house, and there's a huge family portrait on the wall, with people who are not blood relatives, meaning they're not blood relatives of my mother, and they're not blood relatives of her husband, which is not my father anymore. Meaning they're my mother's stepson's girlfriends, who happen to be, the mothers of her husband's children. But all these children are in it. My daughter was over at my grandmother's house, for a little vacation, and they all decided to take this huge family portrait. And they decided that they didn't want me in it. And that, is so symbolic to me of where I stand. They just all decided that I'm not part of that family. And understand that while I do not have an affectionate relationship with my mother, at that time, I'd been a model good daughter. I'd had no big blowout debates or arguments with anyone, but I didn't fit, and and was as constructive as I possibly thought I could be, but I didn't fit. And now I feel happy about it because it's a lot less stress for me. But I suppose to some degree it's lonely. I have to admit, I don't feel lonely. I never feel lonely. I think sometimes Sonny used to say to me that he thought, I have one female friend that I talk to quite a bit, and she's not in any way codified, but I can talk to her about certain kinds of things, and we can steer away from certain kinds of things. She doesn't know me as well as she thinks she does. But I know Sonny used to, feel sad for me that I didn't have more of an outlet. He thought that, I was too much of a loner. And actually, I've never asked you this question, and I'm asking you this on the air. What do you think about that now?
About you being lonely and not having any friends?
Yeah.
You got to be like an alien in order to not feel a natural human emotion to want to connect to the same sex, and have them understand where you're coming from. And you don't have much friends to even begin with. You don't have any friends to begin with.
That's not true. Come on.
I don't call Stephanie a friend because she doesn't see you. A friend is someone who sees you. So she doesn't see you, therefore you have no female friends. But the thing is that she, at least you can just tell her things, and you can relate as a black female to female, even though you can't talk about racism to her. Now, how much fulfillment you get out of that?
Well, and I do. Wait a minute. My sister and I do get along now. Now we do. You have to admit it. Come on.
Yeah, but do we have to go through the whole history now? Because you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like everything is fresh with you concerning friends, black females and whatnot, or male females, or any friend, attempted friend that you want to discuss. But the thing is, I mean, how does that put you in any different boat than Fuller, Francis,
well, I'm saying I want
Josh Wicked. You know what I'm saying?
I'm asking you about you. I mean, now that you find yourself in this sort of situation, do you have a different sort of take on it?
Do I look at you any different as do I feel sorry for you?
Do you see it any differently? Because, like, I don't feel sorry for myself.
No, I don't feel sorry. I never truly felt sorry for you as though I took pity on you, like you are not a person who can't occupy their own mind. That's why I mentioned the alien thing, because out of all the people that I know, that it was an issue for them to not have somebody to relate to as a friend. And you never had that problem until recently, but you still had this person that you could choose to call a friend, but the person in your eyes was dissatisfied, whereas your taste to want to connect with this individual as a friend. So the thing is no, I don't feel sorry for you. I never have. But at the same token, you have to wonder, you got a little bit of alien in you because it never really bothered you in the first place.
What? That's not really true. It bothered me, but not to the point of, like, I never lost any sleep over it, I mean, I wouldn't have attempted the friendships that I did attempt if I didn't want that company. I tempted, but I mean, it's like I never was tortured over it. But I mean, now I'm asking you, because now are you not in the same situation, and how is that affecting you?
I'm not afraid of not being seen, but I'm also happy that I'm not around the individuals who don't see me and don't want to see me.
Right, so are you feeling isolated and afraid and alone?
Absolutely not.
Well, now you can see how I was. You see what I mean? It's just, when you understand the system, you understand yourself better, and you become better company for yourself, you see? And so you don't feel, like, deprived. If anything, you feel a sense of peace and a sense of,
I feel electrified, actually, because
I don't feel that.
Before, not having knowledge makes you electrified, but the knowledge of racism, white supremacy, makes you extremely self-empowered, because you can see, like Neo in the Matrix, what is going on, and you can predict things. And now you can see, not only can you predict and see, but you can choose what to do based on the events that you see coming. And it's quite tickling, actually, to do those things. You become a different individual. You become, quote unquote, a master of your environment, so to speak. And not in the sense that I can stop racism, white supremacy from it happening to others, but I can predict how hard they can hit me this time. That's empowering.
Yeah.
Because eventually I'm going to get to the point to where I can hit you harder than you hit me.
Yeah. Well, I still don't have any advice to give to, and I heard what you said. I did. I still don't have any advice on giving out to give to a single person.
Well, what is their intent? What is the intent?
But for most of the time that I knew this information, I was single. For a long part of the time. But I was so caught up in being a single parent, too, you see. So, and I remember the only other female that I knew that it was codified here in San Diego, Pam, not the Pam that we're thinking of. But she, she was the same situation. I mean, we would talk to each other just constructively on the job, and that was her life, she raised her children. and here and there she would have a date or two, but she didn't have any female friends, and that was a lot of it. Because the thing is, I could have female company if I wanted to. I mean, I make, as you know, you very well know, that if I wanted to have a lot of girls to hang out with, I could totally have it. You know, I mean,
that's incorrect. That's not true. Because females, they'll tend to have this problem with you. I've seen it over and over again.
What?
It'll be some kind of a sexual problem. It'll be a problem in which there'll be bursts of things not being said that will reveal themselves later. I mean, if it means that you got to crawl, then maybe you will have some female friends.
That's what I'm talking about. You know very well that there's how many I hear myself echoing. How many females do you know of who called me like their best friend, or they're next to their best friend? And can you mute me? Can you mute your line for a second? Because I can hear myself. How many females have you seen come in and out of my life who, as long as I let it be what it would be, they thought I was their best friend? They were just like constantly calling me and always inviting me to do things, and they were just as happy as anything, as Kool-Aid, and they didn't even know that anything was anything less than what they thought it was, because I would show them the part that they could handle. But the problem is that becomes boring for me. I would rather be in my own company. That's what I'm talking about. The only burst of the stuff that comes out is when I finally decide, I'd really like to stretch out and be more of myself. That's the only time when there's an issue. That's all I'm saying.
Well, you need to hook up with some of these counter-racist females in another state then, because I think you can have some female friends.
Oh, I think so too, but unfortunately, you know how strung out we are. We're just very far-flung. So, I mean, I could say the same thing to you. The only thing I'm just using myself as an example, because this is the isolationism, and I'm just trying to offer some insights into how I've dealt with it, and maybe how you've dealt with it, because you're saying it's not bothering you at all. And I guess what I'm saying is, once you understand the system, you become like a whatever, I don't know.
You are my best friend.
Well, see, I know.
And I'm not really tripping off of anybody else taking that position. To be truly honest with you, is because I just keep learning more and more and more and more. So I'm not worried about getting new friends. Hell, I'm worried about getting a job. I need money. That's what I'm worried about. Let's focus on the basics. I've had enough friends throughout my career as a person, all right? Now I need money. And most importantly, I understand the value of having a friend. And now, to me, the definition of it is, if we could talk about racism, white supremacy, and at the end of the day not be at each other's throats, then we can be friends. You know what I'm saying? But all of that other types of friendship, that the clubbing, the drinking, the hanging out, the doing this, the doing that, running around, and still being sensitive, because I still was, and we hung out and we did those things, that's cool. But the only thing that was missing was an understanding and an openness to not keep the secrets of racist man and racist woman between us. And that's what I'm done with. Your turn.
Kin or not, right? Kin or not.
Kin or not. And most of the time they were not kin. But the closest ones were kin, and we still can talk about racism. Your turn.
Okay, well, I'm actually out of things to say on this topic. If you have more, we can extend the conversation some more, I suppose. But I don't know what else to say right now.
There is not now, nor has there ever been, since the establishment of white supremacy, racism, any greater contributing force to the strengthening and continuation of racism in its most refined form than the racism that is practiced through sexual activity between white people and black people, particularly between white men and black females.
I don't think anyone has ever really explained why it's worse with the black female. I don't think we've had a thorough discussion of why it's worse with black females than with black males.
Well, the old discussion was based on the fact that the black female is the one that produces the genetics that determine the characteristics of the child. And so that the child, in a sense, and this is sexism too, that the child will be weaker if the white male impregnates the black female, that it would have the characteristics of the white male, since the female in herself would be overridden by the male characteristics in that egg. So that was the first synopsis or philosophy based on that. But now that we know that that's not true, it's still up for grabs. You know, I think it's equally as damaging. I think if, well, I'll give you an example. My son, my offspring, I'm not going to call him my son because I'm not a father. But the thing is that his characteristics aren't completely and truly like mine. In fact, I find less in common with him to me than I do with him and his oxyhominoid racist mother. And that is the fact that his characteristics are more blended into hers because of his features. I don't think he looks like me. I don't think he looks completely like me. I think there are some things that are like me that are like him, which is his height, but definitely not his skin color and his hair texture. I don't think that my genes are more genetically dominant in him. I don't think that his characteristics based on him having black energy or a black attitude or a black rhythm are in me. I do not think that he has that, and I don't think that he inherited it from me. Okay? So I'm not going to say that my genes are dominant in him, nor is my characteristics dominant in him as well. So that argument is out the window. But at the same time, that's interesting because when I looked at him through YouTube videos that he broadcast himself on, it was interesting because he looked like me more on the camera, but he doesn't in person. And the reason why he doesn't in person is because his energy is not black. That's genes. Those are his genetics. So it's a gene toss. You never know what you're going to get. Your turn.
And the problem with having a hybrid offspring is that all the other hybrids and then the white people are grabbing for them. You know, because I now have a sexually mature daughter who's a hybrid, and I was bound and determined to get the black genetics back because I feel like my genes were stolen, you know. And Sonny and I were never able to have offspring together, or haven't been able to, and I felt like my genes were stolen. And so, at least, I didn't want white people to grab my genes, you know, because I felt like I was a theft of my very genetics. And so, really, groomed her to have a preference for black males, which obtained until very recently. And now I think she's throwing the whole thing open is because she has so many males who are not black, and we don't live in an area where there are a lot of black males who are pursuing her so aggressively. It's very, I feel like I'm in a fight for my life, for my life after this life. And that's what happens when you have hybrids. It's very difficult because the sea that we swim in. You can control everything. You can try to control TV and everything. The one thing that I didn't do is I probably should have moved to an area where there were more black people. I didn't realize it was that important. I guess I didn't. I got caught up in a struggle for survival, and it wasn't an option to move someplace where there's. But I live in the area of San Diego where there's the most black people, but it's still it's tough because she gets out in the world and Mr. Filipino and Mr. Mexican, Mr. White Mexican, and Mr. Straight Oxyhominoid, and they outnumber the black males that are pursuing her 10-1. With a lot of flattery. And, I really understand why so many white people say and said historically, you know, if you come home with a black if you come home with a black boy or a black girl, don't expect me. If you marry one, I will disown you. Don't expect me to accept it. Don't expect me to accept the grandchildren. They won't be my grandchildren. And I understand I understand that hard line now, because they just steal you. They steal you from yourself, and that would be even more of a tragedy, for me, if that's the way it goes. I don't feel like I want to grandparent something that's not, definitely not something that's the mix between her and some white guy. But I don't feel like I want to grandparent the offspring of her and some non-black person. I don't. It's a lot of work, and I just don't. I feel like I'm just gone. I have no desire to grandparent that. So hopefully that's years and years off. But this is what happens when you have a hybrid too. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm a runaway slave. My offspring is 1,762 miles away from me. And being a black male in the system of racism, white supremacy, in this type of world right now with this economy, there ain't no way that I'm going to be able to reach back to demean or try to defer him from trying to get with an oxyhominoid white female. I mean, based on the way his behavior and activity is right now, he does not associate himself as black or mixed. He is extremely confused, and he is extremely hostile towards things that are black, living in the area of the world that is filled with oxyhominoids, filled with them. So the way that he looks at himself is is based on genetics, backed up by the teachings of racist man, racist woman that are his so-called uncles and so-called stepfather that live around him and have raised him. So they have done a very good job in that area as well. So it is through the medium of sexual activity that the racist male white supremacist uses most effective the tools of flattery, bribery, pretended love, and or general hypocrisy and deceit. Racist man uses these methods to wage war against black people and black females, particularly black males and black females. So in addition to that, the so-called hidden sexual activity between white males and black females is done more towards maintaining confusion in the movement to eliminate racism than any other single factor. Because the black female, well, in particular, is the open back door through which the male white supremacist, racist, completes and parades his cycle of racism. And you can add the black male into that too, because she dominates him, so he functions as a female as well, and that's why he's taking care of the offspring while she's taking his money and she's running businesses with it and telling him that he can't go and see his sick mama while she's doing it.
Do you want to say what page you were reading from?
I'm not reading from any page in the code book. Oh,
you think you're reading that from online?
Now, I was just saying it off the top of my head. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to steal my shine? You always trying to put dust on fire. What are you?
Stop. Come on now.
I just got it like that.
Okay, all right. Oh, come on. Okay, you got it like that. All right. I didn't know you had memorized those passages. Well, I'm ready to sign off if you are.
Yeah, I guess I'm ready to sign off too.
Okay. This has been the Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer program for Sunday, August 19th, 2012. And be back at you sometime. Don't know when. Signing out.